As we get closer to the fantasy season, we keep getting reminded that every single day feels like a year once actual football starts to happen. So that's why we're going through the top 36 running back rankings for 2024. And of course, I'm giving away free FFN hats. And the way to qualify to get one is to go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and give me your favorite sleeper wide receiver for 2024. So let's go ahead and start out with this first tier right here. Nothing changes in this tier. I've got Christian McCaffrey still as top dog. Listen, Christian McCaffrey, obviously there's a lot of discussion, like, should we take CeeDee Lamb now that he's signed officially? Should we take Tyreek Hill? That conversation's been pretty ongoing. Christian McCaffrey is the rightful number one pick because he is the only guy that can outscore the running back 2 or any positional group in the second position by over 100 points. So in my mind, I cannot rightfully tell anybody to not draft Christian McCaffrey out of fear, out of an injury. I get it. It's not a fun pick to have this year, the 101. I don't want the 101 pick, but if I had it, I would take McCaffrey because at the end of the day, if I look back later in the year and he has a great year and I didn't pick him because I was scared, I'd feel really bad, and I would probably not be winning the championship. And then obviously Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson in this tier as well. Look, Breece Hall kind of overtook Bijan in my own personal rankings a couple weeks ago. And really my thing with Breece Hall is that I think there's just less question marks about his workload in this offense. Like, what we can expect from Breece Hall is a complete monopoly on this backfield. Like, Braylon Allen is going to be a solid number 2 running back, but he is not going to take legitimate opportunities away from Breece Hall. With Bijan Robinson, I still believe he will be top dog in Atlanta, but there, of course, is that shadow of a doubt that was cast a couple weeks ago when the offensive coordinator said, yeah, Algiers still going to be involved. So, not a good thing for Bijan owners to hear. And I think that it's ultimately going to be a non-factor. I think they will be run first, and I think it will run through Bijan, which is why he's still in tier 1. I just prefer Breece Hall over Bijan Robinson at this point. Now, jumping on to our next tier here, I've got it the same as well. Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, and Kyren Williams here. Jahmyr Gibbs, I just prefer him over JT because I think they'll both have potential issues with red zone work, but what I can count on more with Jahmyr Gibbs is reception work that he will get out of the backfield. Listen, with Anthony Richardson, this is a guy who can run. And I did research this offseason trying to find the average amount of targets per game for running backs with running quarterbacks, and it's usually pretty low. So obviously with Jahmyr Gibbs being with Jared Goff, that's going to benefit him a ton because we know we can count on those even if some of the red zone work is gobbled up. As far as Jonathan Taylor goes, he's still in this tier because I believe that when you look at what he actually did last year, he wasn't getting much work in the receiving game anyways. So it's like, okay, take one more target away from him. What does it realistically do? This guy is still really young. He's young enough to still break off big plays in the backfield. So I do believe that he ultimately will have another top season with a good offensive line, with a good offensive head coach, and with a good full season of Anthony Richardson. And then Kyren Williams here. I want to discuss him because I feel like he's a hot topic right now. Obviously, there's news that came out that the Los Angeles Rams are planning to use Kyren Williams as a punt returner. And listen, I can understand where people are coming from when they're getting worried, and I've already seen his draft price drop. Like, I can understand where people are coming from because obviously we have history of someone like Dameon Pierce last year. That's a recent example of somebody who was a kick returner last year and was horrendous in fantasy football, even though a lot of us, including myself, projected him to be a pretty good running back. Now, I'm not worried about this with Kyren. That's not to say that Kyren Williams is going to repeat as elite as he was last year. That's just to say that I think this is being overplayed. And I think that when we look back and if you dropped Kyren Williams several spots in your rankings, if he ends up finishing this high, I think it's totally in the cards for him because I really just don't see it affecting him. So if he ends up finishing this high, again, it's going to be like McCaffrey where it's like, don't let the fear of something like this really drop them in drafts because this is just not a really concerning situation in all reality. Now, jumping on to our next tier here, we've got Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, and Devon Achane in this next tier here. And listen, my Derrick Henry versus Saquon argument, I've made it clear throughout the offseason. I believe Derrick Henry has the better shot at exceeding at one particular thing that Saquon Barkley has. I think Derrick Henry could lead the league in rushing touchdowns, whereas with Saquon Barkley, not only do I think he's going to underachieved based on expectations with his rushing touchdowns. I also believe that his receiving work is not going to be as high as people think as well. Because, yes, there is a reality that out of rushing quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts does throw the ball to running backs. But the problem is that think about the two running backs that are in Philadelphia's backfield other than Saquon. You've got Will Shipley, who they just drafted this year out of Clemson, and you've got Kenneth Gainwell. Both of those guys have pass-catching profiles. That's what they do. So I really have a hard time believing Saquon monopolizes the backfield here. And that's just going to lower his fantasy upside. Now with Devon Achane at number 9, this is all upside. Like, this is weird talking exclusive upside when we're talking about Devon Achane here. And I can acknowledge this. This may not be the smartest ranking, but it is something I internally feel. With Devon Achane, his floor is not this high. His floor is probably around like running back 15, running back 16-ish, like middle end RB2 area. The floor is obviously lower than the ceiling, and the ceiling is so stupid high. So I think Devon Achane probably has like a top 3, top 5 ceiling. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm kind of taking the middle ground here. Because with Devon Achane, I expect him to lead the backfield at some point during the season. Raheem Mostert very well may be the plan, but the reality is this guy is in his 30s now, and I don't believe that it's realistic to expect him to hold up and have another season like last year in his 30s when he's not exactly been healthy throughout his entire career. Whereas Devon Achane, not the healthiest guy either, but he did do work to put on muscle, and he obviously has just a ridiculous skill set in a running back friendly offense in the Miami Dolphins room. All ceiling here, I'm good with ranking him at number 9. Now jumping down to the next tier here, I've got Isaiah Pacheco still at number 10, but I gotta tell you guys, the first 3 running backs in this tier, they're fluid. You can rank them however you want to. They're very, very fluid for me. Pacheco, James Cook, Josh Jacobs, I have played around with them. In fact, I briefly had Jacobs above Pacheco today, and I rethought it. The reason they're all fluid for me is because with Isaiah Pacheco, the good thing is what we heard this offseason from head coach Andy Reid is that when he was asked, like, who's going to be your third down back this year, since there's no more Jerick McKinnon, who's going to be the pass catching guy? He said, yeah, it's going to be Pacheco. Like, he's going to be the guy. So that was obviously a massive vote of confidence here. Now, they did go out and they signed Samaje Perine off of the waiver wire when he was cut by the Denver Broncos. So it's not that like that's a major cause for concern, obviously, but Samaje Perine, again, exclusively specializes as a receiving back. So what are the chances that he, at some point this season, starts to take more of that role? It gives me a little bit of doubt. And with James Cook here, the doubt really isn't in any major moves that have happened recently. It's really just a doubt in the rushing touchdown totals. Like last year, 2 rushing touchdown totals. I think he'll probably get maybe a couple more, but even if it's a couple more, it won't be many more. Josh Allen, the reality with him is similar to Jalen Hurts. He's going to take rushing touchdowns away from James Cook. What I love about James Cook, obviously, is that he has Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator from the second half of last year, who he exceeded with. So I just really ultimately do have belief in James Cook. That's why he's still here at 11. But Josh Jacobs is the big wild card for me. Josh Jacobs has a chance to honestly move up to the next tier for me. So what the big issue is with Josh Jacobs is that obviously Coach Matt LaFleur over there, he's historically used a 2 running back system. He likes to have a running back by committee. That may very well be the case. But here's a couple things that I want everybody to think about. So they signed Josh Jacobs to a pretty big contract this year, giving him plenty of money to be their number 1 guy. Now, the running back that they wanted to use in the committee is Marshawn Lloyd, and he is still not practicing. So a mid-round pick basically has missed all offseason of practice with the team. That's historically not a good thing. Then the other guy they could do with A.J. Dillon, he's done for the year. So they're looking at like their 4th string running back as their committee guy. What are the chances that works out? Other than the obvious answer, Josh Jacobs is the guy. I think that this whole running back by committee thing may very well happen, and that's why he's still lower than Pacheco and Cook. But ultimately, this guy's ceiling is probably higher than both of theirs, in my opinion, because if he gets the workload, I think that he could easily be in for a maybe similar year to what he had in 2022. Now, Travis Etienne, Rachaad White, and Alvin Kamara round out this tier at 13, 14, and 15. And with Travis Etienne, listen, I think that he's going to be a lot more efficient this year. I think that he'll still get a decent amount of touchdowns. But the reason why I think he's going to be more efficient is because I think he's going to get less volume. Tank Bigsby, they have talked about all offseason. Not just they, head coach Doug Peterson has talked about, yeah, we're gonna lighten his workload this year, Travis Etienne, and we're gonna get Tank Bigsby more involved. Now, that was not the case when he was talking in the media last year. Last year, he was referring to Travis Etienne as a 15 to 1600 yard guy. He's not saying that this year. He's saying, yeah, there's going to be an effort to get Tank Bigsby more involved in this offense. So just hearing what Coach Peterson has to say, I just don't believe that he's going to see the volume he had last year. And that might end up benefiting him as a player, but I don't think it benefits him in fantasy football. Now, with Rachaad White and Alvin Kamara, I really view them as kind of similar players in a way, where they're both inefficient backs. And they're both going to be excellent receiving backs, in my opinion. I think that Alvin Kamara is obviously one of the best receiving backs we've seen in the last 10 to 20 years. So he's a better receiving back than Rachaad White, but we can count on more rushing volume for Rachaad White than we can with Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is not going to see the amount of rushing volume that Rachaad White does. And I think that just based on Rachaad White being several years younger than Alvin Kamara, I just like his trajectory for an entire season better than I like the projection of Alvin Kamara doing it for an entire season. I just think it's less likely that Alvin Kamara holds up for an entire year versus Rachaad White, but they're really both kind of in the same tier for me at this point. Now, dropping down to our next tier here, we've got David Montgomery to start out the tier. Then we've got Kenneth Walker at 17. Dave Montgomery, I actually kind of flirted with the idea of putting Kenneth Walker above Dave Montgomery. And the reason I couldn't do it is because with Kenneth Walker, a lot of it is speculation. A lot of the discussions about him being the 3-down running back, it is speculation. And listen, you can make the case that that's a lot of guys on this list, like Pacheco. I think that's speculation. We could consider that as well. With Montgomery, we really know what his role is going to be. He's going to be at the goal line, getting a lot of goal line touchdowns, and he will handle carries between the 20s as well. So his role in this offense is so ironed out that it makes me feel better about taking him here, because when he has those goal line opportunities, running behind the best offensive line in football, according to Pro Football Network, his chances of getting rushing touchdowns are just simply higher. They're just simply higher than Kenneth Walker. With Kenneth Walker, if he ends up taking the total, complete control of the backfield, obviously he's going to move up. Obviously, he will be over Dave Montgomery. And I like his chances to lead the backfield because they did sit him out in preseason games. But make no mistake, this team is still going to have Zach Charbonnet involved. And I really don't see a world where they just all of a sudden decrease the touches that Charbonnet had last year. If anything, I think it's going to increase. So I'm still struggling to get on board with Kenneth Walker. This one I could be really wrong on, but we'll have to see what happens because I'm sticking with him here at 17 for now. Now, James Conner is above Joe Mixon this time in these rankings right here. And listen, it's because of two reasons. Number one, I think James Conner is a really overlooked player. And this is coming from a guy who has struggled to get on board for years with James Conner as a fantasy player. And it's maybe a little late, but it's better late than never. Because James Conner is going to monopolize the backfield for the beginning portion of the season. I think there's a good chance that James Conner gets off to a really hot start. And what do we know about James Conner? We can almost sort of count on him missing 2 to 3, maybe 4 games in a season. Now, at that point, Trey Benson will come in, and I think he will do well. And I think by that point, that's going to be towards the back end of the season. So there's a good chance that James Conner is a top 10 running back in all seriousness through the first 8 games. But in the back, 9 to 10 games, there could be a chance that James Conner significantly falls in rankings for sure. So that's kind of why I've got him here at 18. And I just like him better than Joe. When I look at Joe Mixon, this dude has not been with the team basically all offseason. He's been with the team, but he has not practiced. He has not played. He's done nothing with the Texans so far. This guy is in his late 20s, and he's walking into an offense, yes, similar to the Cincinnati Bengals, but just another year older with a new team that he hasn't gotten much time with. And by the way, it was not historically great with running backs last year. And listen, I think Joe Mixon's obviously a better player than Dameon Pierce. But Joe Mixon worries me because I just don't believe that he's going to come in right away and without any practice time on the new team, just shine right away. So if anything, like, he hits like mid-season, but again, it's similar to James Conner where it's like, how likely is it going to be that he holds up and provides a lot of upside by the back end of the year? So I ultimately prefer James Conner over Joe Mixon, but I'm really not big on drafting Joe Mixon personally. Now, the last two guys in this tier, these are some of my favorite and most drafted running backs on Underdog. Brian Robinson at 20 and Javonte Williams at 21. They're both above consensus for me. Brian Robinson Jr., I have made the argument, and I've really amped up the argument recently because I am a big believer in Brian Robinson this year. What I really like is that really everybody in Washington just kind of moved up for me. With Jayden Daniels, I really do think they're going to shock a lot of people this year. I think Jayden Daniels is going to increase the value of fantasy assets in this wide receiver offense because he is going to provide rushing upside. Now, the rushing upside, what that specifically does for running backs is it makes them more efficient because defenses cannot key in on stopping the running back when they know a run situation is coming. They're on their toes because they know at any point Jayden Daniels could be the one taking off of the ball. So that is going to keep defenses on their toes, enabling Brian Robinson to turn that 4.1 yards per carry into like 4.5, maybe 4.6. And I also believe that since Jayden Daniels is a smaller framed quarterback, similar to Lamar Jackson, I think he's going to have more rushing touchdowns this year. And I think it could be close to 10. Because what we see from guys like Lamar Jackson is they're not running in at the end zone as much because they're smaller and their teams don't want to risk them at the goal line. With Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, they're both big dudes who are really built, so their teams don't really worry about it, and that's why they consistently get more rushing touchdowns than Lamar Jackson does. So I really do feel confident about Brian Robinson. I'm not worried about Eckler at all because the reality with quarterbacks, when they run, is they don't throw the ball to running backs. So Austin Eckler, I think, is honestly cooked in this offense. I think it's Brian Robinson's offense in the running back field. And with Javonte Williams, it's really been a wild offseason. Like, we went from reports of him being the lead back to being the number 2 with Jaleel McLaughlin as the number 1, all the way down to he might get cut. Like, it was insane. So obviously he doesn't get cut. He looks like the running back 1, but it also does look like Jaleel McLaughlin will be having more opportunities this year. I'm on board with that. That's actually why he's a little bit lower than I'd like him to be. Because Javonte Williams, the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that they cut Samaje Perine, as we said earlier, and Samaje Perine is opening up about 60 targets in this offense for the running back position. Now, will all those go to Javonte? In all likelihood, very, very unlikely that happens. I'm sure some of them will go to Jaleel McLaughlin, but Javonte Williams was not exactly low on targets last year. So I think Javonte Williams is going to look better all around this year, coming into his second year off the ACL tear. And I actually do believe that this Denver offense as a whole is just going to look better than a lot of people predict. Now, dropping down the next tier right here, Raheem Mostert's at 22, and DeAndre Swift and Aaron Jones are at 23 and 24. Full disclosure, last time I did the running back rankings, I actually forgot to put Raheem Mostert on the list. He was on my initial list. I just forgot to include him in the video, and that's totally on me. But Raheem Mostert is rightfully here in this tier for me. I can't put him much higher than this because I'll be honest, like during the early portion of the offseason, I was really big on Raheem Mostert. I was drafting him as much as I could everywhere. Raheem Mostert, just the reality, dude's he's in his 30s now. And like I said, last year was the most games he had played in an entire year of his NFL career. So history's just not on his side in a lot of ways, and I do think that Devon Achane is going to end up being the number 1 running back by the end of the year in Miami. Now, the good thing about this Miami offense is it's so running back friendly that Raheem Mostert is still going to be a top 30 guy, top 25 guy, but he is definitely lower in my rankings compared to some because Raheem Mostert, I do believe, ultimately is going to suffer from the age being a factor and possibly an injury being a factor, but he definitely will suffer from Achane taking over the backfield at some point. Now, with DeAndre Swift, I rose him up over Aaron Jones, and really this all has to do with offensive upside. Now, I want to make clear, I think Minnesota's offensive coach is genius. I think Kevin O'Connell is a great offensive mind. But the reality is they have Sam Darnold and Chicago has Caleb Williams. And when I look at this Chicago offense, I think they'll be more pass first. then they will be run first. But the other positive thing that I like about DeAndre Swift, I will say, is that with Caleb, he can obviously move. He can run on his own, but he's not going to be getting you Jalen Hurts rushes. Like, he's not going to be that active on the ground. He will dump the ball off to DeAndre Swift at times. Like, we saw it in the preseason already. He was really creative. Obviously, he's a super creative quarterback, so there will be opportunities through the air with DeAndre Swift. The big question, obviously, is how do the running back carries shake out? And that's the ultimate question I have with Swift, but that's why I've got him here this late in the rankings right here, whereas Aaron Jones here, not only do I not believe in him being able to hold up for a full season at the age that he's at, but like I said, the offensive upside here is not as high simply because of Sam Darnold. Like, I believe in Minnesota's offensive ability because of Kevin O'Connell, and I don't think they'll be as bad as some people may think, but I don't think that they'll be obviously providing the upside that they did a year ago with Kirk Cousins. I think it'll be very similar to how it went towards the end of last year without Kirk Cousins, where if you remember, Ty Chandler, he had a couple big games for the Minnesota Vikings, but it was a little bit few and far between. So I just think that Aaron Jones is in for another downturn this year because he's going from a better offense to a worse offense, and ultimately I just think another year of age is going to catch up to him again. Now, to round out this tier, Zamir White, Najee Harris, and Ramondre Stevenson. This is really the group of guys right here that, like, excluding Najee Harris, Zamir White and Ramondre Stevenson, the people who are so volume focused want to see these guys higher. And listen, I get it. Like, I'm not trying to insult those people, but what I'm here to tell you is that volume is king in fantasy football. You obviously need volume to be good in fantasy, but that doesn't mean all volume is the same. All volume is not quality volume. Zamir White and Ramondre Stevenson, they won't have quality volume. Ramondre Stevenson definitely won't. Like, he's projected by Vegas Insider to be on the worst team in the NFL. The Patriots, I've said this myself before I even saw what their predictions were. The Patriots are going to be horrendous this year. Sorry, Patriots fans. But I think the Raiders' offense is going to be really bad too. Like, I think the Raiders' defense is so strong this year. They'll actually keep them in a lot of close games, but it's not going to be because they're scoring a lot of points. It'll be because the defense is keeping the other teams in low-scoring games, like 13-13, 16-13 type games. I think that this offense is going to struggle to move the ball with Gardner Minshew. And Zamir White, we just don't have as much of a sample size that I would like for me to rank him much higher, considering he's on a bad offense. Now, with Najee Harris at 26, it really just comes down to a disbelief in the Steelers' ability to move the ball offensively too. So he's in that same tier with these guys as well. Now, I do want to say I do believe he will lead the backfield because I think he fits more of Arthur Smith's play calling style. And I also do believe in the narrative a little bit. Najee is on a contract year, so they will get him more opportunities. But I will say that Najee Harris cannot escape a bad offense. It just can't happen. So he's in this tier with Zamir White, Ramondre Stevenson down at the bottom of this tier. Now, dropping down to the next tier right here, there's been a lot of changes in this tier. Chase Brown at 28, Gus Edwards at 29. So obviously this tier right here, you can see, is comprised of guys who maybe look like the running back 1 or the running back 2 in a committee backfield. Chase Brown, apparently Cincinnati's going to be splitting touches offensively with the running backs. This offense is obviously so well run with Joe Burrow there, and it's got so much upside with Joe Burrow that I want to be in on a running back. I can't decide who I want in every single draft I'm in. At this point, I've really honed down on Chase Brown because I just believe that he's the younger player, and I think he's really explosive and may end up just doing better in passing down situations than Zach Moss will. So I prefer him this point over Zach Moss. Now with Gus Edwards here, I just want in on a Chargers running back. It's just as simple as that. Like, I want in on a Chargers running back, and I still believe he will lead the backfield. I think that him missing a bunch of practice time this offseason was not ideal at all. And I do think that we'll get to the running back 2 in this offense here in a bit. But I think Gus Edwards probably leads the backfield by the end of the season. And I think that Gus Edwards is just in such a great running offense. Like, this offense is going to run the ball so much. They've got Greg Roman there. They've got Jim Harbaugh. That's a run culture. And they've obviously got a really good offensive line. So I just want in on a Chargers running back, and Gus Edwards looks to be the guy right now. Now with Tyjae Spears at 30 and Ezekiel Elliott at 31, Tyjae Spears, I still prefer him over Tony Pollard, but this one's getting closer. And it really is similar to the Chase Brown, Zach Moss argument, which is like, do you want to take the younger guy or do you want to take the older guy? For me, I'm usually on the side of taking the younger guy. And I actually do think that Tajay this year, at this point of his career, is going to be more efficient than Tony Pollard will be. And I also do think that Tajay Spears, with his receiving upside, it looks to be more prominent at this point of his career than it is for Tony Pollard's, at least based on last year. So I think that in an offense that could very well be pass heavy, this will probably favor Tajay Spears. Now with Zeke, listen, I want to be in on a Cowboys running back. I just can't get excited about Zeke. I mean, this is a guy who has lost all explosion, basically. He'll catch the ball a decent amount, I think, which is why he deserves to be in this rankings list right here. But at the same time, man, like, Zeke is just not providing much efficiency these days. I don't think he'll be the red zone carry guy. I think that probably gets put to Rico Dowdle. Dalvin Cook maybe, but I don't think that Dalvin Cook's going to be much of a factor to worry about. Zeke just really is not exciting because I just don't think his efficiency is going to be there, and I don't think the red zone opportunities will be there, which means that he'll have to get his touchdowns through big runs, which probably not going to happen too much. Now, with Tony Pollard and Zach Moss here to round out this tier 32 and 33, Tony Pollard, again, I could easily see him being over Tajay Spears at some point. I think he's got, obviously, the contract that would warrant a bigger workload than Tajay Spears. He's got the longer history of work and a resume that's longer than Tajay Spears. But I ultimately do think that this offense is not going to be run first. It's going to be pass first. So I just think that Tony Pollard probably doesn't benefit from that as much as Tajay does. And then with Zach Moss here. Zach Moss, I could easily see being the number one guy earlier in the year. That's why I choose Chase Brown, though, is because I think Chase Brown actually finishes the year as the running back one. So it may be a split. It may be one of the guys is the running back one early. The other one is the running back one late. I've wanted to be in on Zach Moss all offseason, but this Bengals running back situation is definitely going to be one to watch because you definitely want in on one, but I can't tell you who that guy is just yet. Now, dropping down to the last tier right here. I'm starting it off with the guy I've been all over all offseason. If you watch my channel all offseason, it should not surprise you. Chuba Hubbard, I think, is so undervalued this year. Chuba Hubbard is at 34 right here, and I could, if I had the nerve to put him higher, I might at some point. And I want you to watch out for week one rankings just in a week or so. Chuba Hubbard will be higher on this list than 34. Just make sure to watch that rankings video next week, the running back rankings video for week one. Chuba Hubbard, I've gone through it all offseason. I think this guy, when I did research about unexpected league-winning running backs over the years that we've seen, like Kyron Williams, Josh Jacobs a couple years ago, and Raheem Mostert last year, all of those guys had traits that matched Chuba Hubbard's to a freaking T. So Chuba Hubbard comes into the season as the lead back. Jonathan Brooks is on the PUP list, so he's going to miss the first 4 games. And by that time, maybe Chuba wins this job. I don't think it's a very wise move to count on a running back who is a rookie this year and coming off an ACL tear. Not all running backs come off right away from an ACL tear the next year and are still great. And we don't even know if he is great at the NFL level. We know that Dave Canales likes him a lot, and he's been raving about him all offseason. So Chuba Hubbard is my big prediction here at 34. And then with Jaylen Warren, I've got Jaylen Warren at 35 because I just think that the Steelers offense stinks. It stinks. I'm sorry. And I really do believe that he won't fit the scheme that Arthur Smith is going to run as well as Najee does. So the hamstring injury doesn't concern me at this point because we do have news that he probably will play week one. So I'm not really concerned about the hamstring. I just don't love the Steelers offense at all. I think they're horrible, and I don't think that he'll benefit as much from being on the field as much as Najee Harris does just because of Arthur Smith's preferences on how to run this offense. Now, to round it all out, J.K. Dobbins feels so weird to have at 36 right now. And I could have gone a couple different ways here, but I ultimately picked J.K. Dobbins because, again, I want in on the Chargers backfield. And he looks like the running back 2 / potentially running back 1. So J.K. Dobbins, this is going to be a backfield to watch immediately, right as soon as week 1 starts, because Gus Edwards probably has the inside shot, but J.K. Dobbins is still a little bit younger, and while he's basically got one leg left at this point, J.K. Dobbins is just going to benefit from being on a run-first offense. So if he could potentially capture what he's had in the past of his career, I think J.K. Dobbins is a shot to be even higher than this by the end of the season. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below. And if you want to see the top 36 wide receivers for 2024, click on this video right here.